Welcome to Scoli Sleep Stories. Before we begin, take a moment to get comfortable. Let the day soften around you and settle in for a calm documentary made for curious minds. If these stories help you rest, learn, or simply enjoy a quieter part of the day, please consider liking this episode and subscribing to the channel. Now, when you are ready, let us begin. Chapter 1: At the Edge of the Great River. Early evening settles gently over the upper Amazon. The sky remains broad and pale, but daylight has begun to soften. Along the western horizon, thin clouds hold shades of pearl, muted gold, and quiet gray. Their colors rest upon the river, where bronze water folds into silver and then becomes bronze again. A long, low boat moves with the current. Its engine turns steadily, sending a mild vibration through the wooden boards beneath the passengers' feet. The sound is deep and even, mingling with water touching the hull. Now and then, a small wave brushes the side with a hollow note. Behind the boat, the wake opens in two smooth lines and slowly fades. This journey carries us downstream through villages, forests, flooded woodland, tributaries, and wide open water. A real voyage from the upper Amazon to the Atlantic would cover thousands of kilometers and take far longer than one evening's telling. This is instead a representative passage, gathering distant places and changing seasons into a restful course. The river will turn, widen, darken, and brighten as we hear rain on the roof, leaves stirring above the shore, and insects calling from the trees. Beneath each change, the slow current carries water eastward. To understand the river, it helps to look beyond the water visible from the boat. The Amazon belongs to an immense river basin, all the land from which rainwater, streams, and groundwater drain toward one connected river system. A drop falling on a distant mountain slope may enter a narrow stream. That stream joins another, and then another, until its water becomes part of a tributary flowing into a larger river. In time, the drop may travel far from where it first reached the earth. The Amazon basin covers at least 6 million square kilometers, roughly 1/3 of South America. It includes high mountain headwaters in and near the Andes, where water runs over cold stone, and lowland forests warmed by tropical sunlight. There are wetlands, savannas, farms, towns, and cities, seasonally flooded forests where fish may swim among tree trunks, and broad rivers, narrow creeks, marshes, lakes, and channels hidden beneath leaves. All these landscapes are joined by moving water. The Amazon is the world's largest river system by the amount of water it carries and the area of land draining into it. It is sometimes described as the longest river, though that question is less certain. The answer depends on which distant stream geographers identify as its beginning and how they measure the winding course. It is enough here to know that the Amazon is extraordinarily long and that its many sources reach across a continent. There is no single spring from which the whole river emerges. Its beginning is scattered. It begins in rain tapping mountain grass, in mist gathering on leaves, and in groundwater moving slowly through soil and stone. It begins in wetlands, hillside streams, and tributaries draining ancient uplands, lowland forests, and open savannas. No stream alone creates the Amazon. The river becomes great because so many waters come together. From the boat, much of this system remains unseen. The river before us looks like one wide reach of bronze water. A wooded island rests in the distance, its trees forming a dark green line. Beyond it, another channel may flow, hidden from view. What appears to be mainland may be a large island. What seems a narrow inlet may continue for many kilometers. In some places the opposite shore is clear, in others it is so distant that the river seems to join the sky. Islands divide the current, and secondary channels curve around forested land before meeting again. From water level, the scale is difficult to judge. Rather than one simple line from shore to shore, the Amazon often feels like a chain of broad waterways opening quietly into one another. Near the shaded bank, branches lean over the water, their leaves almost black against the fading sky. Some trees stand above the present river level, others grow where water rises during wetter months. Pale roots hold the low shore in tangled patterns. The current passes without hurry, yet it is always working. It carries fine particles of clay, sand, and silt, together called sediment. Some traveled from distant mountains, and some came from banks loosened by moving water. Even when the surface looks calm, this material is moving downstream. Along one bend, water may gradually wear away the bank. Elsewhere, a slower current releases sediment, building a sandbar or adding new ground to an island. Channels deepen, grow shallower, or shift sideways, so a route that was easy in one season may change in another. People who travel these waters watch the color and texture of the surface. They remember where bars have formed and where the deeper channel lies. Their knowledge cannot remain fixed because the river itself is never entirely fixed. Most changes, however, are too gradual to watch from moment to moment. For now, there is only the low engine pulse through the boards and water touching the boat. A small canoe passes at a comfortable distance. Two figures sit low inside, dark against the reflected sky. A paddle enters the water, draws back, and rises, shedding a few bright drops. Then the canoe continues toward buildings along the shore. This brief sight reminds us that the basin is not an empty wilderness. People have lived throughout the Amazon for a very long time, shaping and understanding these landscapes across generations. Today, tens of millions live within the wider basin. They belong to many communities and cultures, speak many languages, and make homes in indigenous territories, riverside villages, farming regions, small towns, and large cities. Some lives follow the river in its seasons. Others unfold in busy urban neighborhoods beside ports and roads. Boats carry school children, fruit, fuel, fish, building supplies, letters, or relatives returning home. Ferries connect places not easily joined by road, while canoes enter narrow channels and passenger boats travel between distant towns. There is no single Amazonian way of life, just as there is no single Amazonian landscape. The river connects many places without making them all the same. For a while, the boat follows a low shore. Wooden steps lead from a landing toward houses partly hidden among trees. A narrow canoe is secured to a post. Its rope tightens, then relaxes as the hull settles. A few voices cross the river, softened by distance until they are no louder than the engine or the wash beside the hull. The boat continues downstream as the last direct sunlight leaves the water. Bronze reflections deepen, and the forest gathers into one shadowed edge. A bird crosses toward an island and disappears against the trees. Beneath the dim surface, the current still flows around roots, bars, and bends, carrying rain from forests, savannas, wetlands, and mountain streams. The boat shares that quiet movement. Behind us, the riverside city of Iquitos recedes. Its motors, calls, and knocks of wood against wood grow faint across the water. A few warm lights remain beside floating landings that rise and fall with changing river levels. Ropes tighten and loosen beside narrow craft. Then the channel bends, roofs slip behind the bank, and the forest stands closer to the water. Here, the immense basin is present beneath the hull. In distant sediment, changing channels, villages, forests, farms, cities, and waters begun far away. No single stream made this river, and no single landscape explains it. The engine keeps its low rhythm as the final light fades. The shaded bank drifts past, reflections separate and join, and evening settles over the great river, carrying us, without hurry, toward the sea. Chapter 2. Past Iquitos and the Forest Shore. The boat moves downriver from Iquitos in the last warm light of evening. Behind us, the city rests among waterways whose courses have never been entirely still. The Itaya and the Nanay meet the wider river system here, while channels of the Amazon shift gradually across broad floodplains. Banks are softened, rebuilt, and reshaped by water and sediment. Iquitos cannot be pictured as a city beside one simple, permanent channel. Its waterfront belongs to a changing geography of rivers, islands, bends, and seasonally flooded ground. Near the landing places, the city sounds are gentle now. An outboard motor fades into the distance. A rope creaks against a wooden post. Two hulls touch beside a floating dock with a low, hollow sound, then separate again as a small wave passes beneath them. Along the waterfront, boats of many sizes wait for their next journeys. Some are narrow dugout canoes, others are motor canoes with long forms suited to the channels. There are passenger craft, ferries, cargo boats, and working vessels with covered decks. Their paint may be bright or weathered. Their roofs provide shade from the sun and shelter from sudden rain. These boats form part of the practical fabric of life in and around Iquitos. The city has local and regional roads, including the road southward to Nauta, yet it has no conventional road connection to the rest of Peru's national road network. Beyond the larger roads, much travel through the region continues by water. A boat may carry baskets of fruit, bundles of building material, sacks of food, fuel, tools, or freshly caught fish packed carefully for market. It may carry families visiting relatives, school children, patients traveling toward medical care, or people returning home after several days in the city. Supplies move outward from regional centers, while produce and other goods move inward. Every vessel has its own route and purpose, yet all follow the broad pathways made by the rivers. As our boat passes the busiest landings, the vessels become fewer. One cargo boat rests close to shore, its deck quiet beneath a broad roof. A canoe crosses at a patient angle, leaving a narrow wake that opens across the surface and slowly disappears. Farther away, a ferry is reduced to a dark shape beneath the fading sky. The landing places themselves are made with the changing river in mind. Some docks float, rising and falling with the water. Others are connected to shore by ramps that become steeper or flatter as the river level changes. A simple landing may be little more than a cleared patch of bank, a line of wooden steps, or several planks laid carefully above the mud. When channels shift or water recedes, a landing may be adjusted, improvised, or moved to a more useful place. River levels rise and fall seasonally, though the timing is not identical everywhere in the basin, nor exactly the same from one year to the next. Rain may fall far away and still influence the water here, after traveling through tributaries and floodplains. Navigation services observe the river closely. They record current levels, compare them with historical averages, and note periods when the water is rising or falling. This practical information helps boat operators understand which routes remain navigable and where familiar passages may have changed. For those who travel regularly, knowledge also grows through careful observation. The color of the water, the shape of a current, the angle of a mooring line, and the appearance of a sandbar can all offer quiet signs. The river is read slowly, through experience gathered over many journeys. Now the brighter lamps of Iquitos are farther behind. A soft glow remains above the city, but the shoreline ahead grows darker and greener. The engine settles into the background, no longer the largest sound. Water brushes along the hull, leaves move lightly where the evening air reaches them. The forest edge near Iquitos is not one uniform wall of untouched vegetation. Settlements stand along these waterways, as well as gardens, farms, managed forest, and places where trees have returned after earlier clearing. This regrown woodland is often called secondary forest. Urban influence also extends beyond the dense center of the city, following travel routes, small holdings, landing places, and riverside activity. From the channel, these different landscapes may blend together. A line of taller trees can conceal a field or a cluster of homes. Fruit trees may grow beside native forest plants. A narrow path may begin at the bank and vanish beneath the leaves. Human life and forest growth meet in many forms, changing from one bend to the next. Where the trees gather close to the water, their shapes become clearer against the remaining light. A few rise above the others. These scattered giants are often described as emergent trees because their crowns emerge beyond the main roof of leaves. Beneath them stretches the canopy, formed where the crowns of many trees overlap. The forest is sometimes explained as a series of layers. There are scattered emergent trees above, the main canopy below them, then the shaded understory, and finally the forest floor. This is a useful way to understand how height influences light, moisture, and living space. Yet these layers are not separate floors with neat boundaries. Branches cross between them, vines climb upward, young trees grow toward small openings, fallen limbs create gaps where sunlight can reach lower leaves. The canopy receives much of the direct sunlight and wind. It also intercepts heavy tropical rain. Droplets strike the high leaves, gather along their edges, and fall again in smaller drops. Some water runs along branches and trunks. Some remains in pockets of bark or among plants growing above the ground. An earlier shower has left the forest shining. Along the shore, leaves still hold rounded beads of water. Every so often, one slips free and falls through the foliage. It touches another leaf on the way down, then another, making a faint sequence of taps that end somewhere in the dim understory. Beneath the canopy, daylight is softer. It arrives filtered through many layers of green, reflected from leaf to leaf. Even before full darkness, the inner forest appears shaded and cool. Broad leaves catch the last pale light. Thin stems form quiet patterns behind them. Near the ground, roots curve through damp soil, while fallen plant material rests across the forest floor. The boat follows a long bend. For a time, the bank draws close enough for individual branches to appear in the river's reflection. The real leaves and the reflected leaves seem to meet at the waterline. One forest stands upright, another trembles beneath it. Then the channel widens again. The city has become a distant collection of softened sounds. A motor is heard only briefly. A faint voice calls from another boat. Somewhere behind the bend, wood touches wood at a landing no longer visible. Ahead, the forest shore continues in long shaded folds. Small clearings appear and pass. In one, a canoe has been drawn up beside the bank. In another, a narrow roof stands above the water on posts. Then the trees gather once more, and the clearing slips quietly behind us. The hours move with the current. Darkness settles over the river and remains for a while. The engine keeps its low rhythm. Water touches the boat. Along the shore, leaves release the last drops of the earlier rain. At last, the darkness begins to thin. The sky ahead changes first, turning from deep gray to a faint pearly blue. Shapes return slowly along the bank. Tree crowns become visible against the sky, and the smooth surface of the river holds the earliest light. A few moored canoes lie still near the shore. Beyond them, raised houses stand where the river can reach during higher water. Pale threads of cooking smoke lift between the trees, then flatten gently in the morning air. The boat continues toward the waking settlement. A paddle dips somewhere near the bank, enters the water, and rises again. A low voice carries across the channel, then fades. Behind us, Iquitos rests among its changing waterways. Ahead, the first quiet movements of morning begin. The slow current passes beneath us. The shaded bank drifts by, and dawn gathers softly over the river. Chapter 3. Morning in a Riverside Village. Dawn settles gradually over the river, revealing a small settlement along the shaded bank. From the boat, paused a little way offshore, the village appears first as a pattern of roofs, landings, narrow paths, and moored canoes. Some buildings stand close to the water. Others are set farther back among fruit trees and taller forest growth. A pale ribbon of cooking smoke rises between the leaves, while nearby a pot is set down with a gentle, rounded sound. The boat remains in the slow current, far enough away to leave the houses to their morning routines. Water moves softly against the hull. A paddle enters the river with scarcely a splash, drawing a narrow canoe toward a landing. On a covered porch, a hammock is untied from one post and fastened out of the way. Quiet conversation travels easily across the open water, though the words themselves remain indistinct. This is one riverside community among thousands in the Amazon basin, and it cannot represent them all. Communities across this enormous region are richly varied. Some are indigenous settlements with their own languages, histories, and forms of organization. Some are described as ribereño, meaning closely connected with life along the river. Others may be mestizo, caboclo, culturally mixed, urban, peri-urban, or closely linked to a nearby town. Many do not fit neatly beneath any single name. Languages differ from place to place, as do religions, foods, livelihoods, celebrations, homes, and relationships with towns. A settlement near a city may have regular commercial boats, shops, and frequent connections to an urban market. A more distant community may depend on occasional transport or radio communication. Some places have electricity from a public system, a generator, or solar panels. Others use electricity only at certain hours, or not at all. Even neighboring villages may look quite different. Here, several houses stand on posts above the ground. The posts are a practical response to changing water levels. During the season of rising water, the river may spread beyond its present bank and cover land that is dry this morning. A raised floor can remain above the water while canoes approach close to a porch, walkway, platform, or patch of raised land. Building on posts is not a sign that a community belongs to an earlier time. It is a useful form of architecture, shaped by experience with floods, currents, rain, heat, and soil. The height of a floor, the position of a landing, and the materials chosen for walls and roofs all respond to local conditions. Some flood-prone settlements also have floating structures that rise and fall with the water. Yet floating buildings are not found everywhere, just as stilted houses are not universal. On higher land, homes may stand directly on firm ground. Settlement patterns reflect local elevation, flood exposure, available building materials, and the ingenuity of generations. Household income, community history, and access to nearby towns. The changing river also reshapes everyday movement. At high water, a canoe may travel over places that become paths or gardens in another season. At lower water, people may cross broad stretches of ground that lay beneath the river only months earlier. A landing useful during one part of the year may stand far from the water during another, and a different path or set of steps may take its place. Near the bank, a narrow boat rests beside a wooden platform. Another remains tied to a post, turning slightly whenever the current presses against its hull. In much of the basin, boats are ordinary transportation. They carry people to neighboring homes, gardens, farms, schools, health services, markets, and towns. Some are small canoes moved by paddle. Others have outboard motors. Larger passenger boats, cargo vessels, and ferries may follow established routes. A boat here can serve much as a bicycle, bus, car, or delivery vehicle might elsewhere. It is not simply a pleasant shape upon the water. Its size, motor, covering, and carrying capacity are chosen for practical reasons, including the distance to be traveled, the depth of a channel, the strength of the current, and the people or goods that must be carried. As the morning grows clearer, more details emerge along the shore. Behind one row of houses lies a patch of open ground. It might be used for meetings, games, community events, or as a path between buildings. Shared spaces vary greatly across Amazonian settlements. Some communities have a school, a health post, a church, a meeting shelter, a sports field, or a small shop. Some have several of these, others have none, and residents travel by river when they need particular services. A school, where one exists, may serve children from the settlement and from homes scattered along nearby channels. The journey to class might involve walking, paddling, or riding in a school boat. Children in river communities have ordinary and varied lives, with lessons, friendships, responsibilities, leisure, and ambitions of many kinds. Some may wish to remain close to home, others may hope to study or work in a distant town. No brief view from the river can tell us what any one person plans for the future. Beyond the open ground are gardens and cultivated plants. Some grow around houses, where they can be tended easily. Others stand on higher ground, or in fields used only during seasons when the soil is dry enough. Fruit trees may provide shade as well as food. The crops grown in any place depend upon the soil, the pattern of flooding, access to markets, and cultural preference. Livelihoods are equally varied. Fishing supports many diets and local economies, but it is only one part of a much wider picture. People may cultivate floodplain or upland fields, tend home gardens and fruit trees, gather forest products, make crafts, run small businesses, work in tourism, repair equipment, teach, provide health care, hold public sector positions, or take paid employment in nearby towns. A household may combine several kinds of work over the course of a year. These activities cannot be assigned reliably by gender or age. Responsibilities differ among households and communities, and they change with circumstance. What looks from a distance like a simple morning routine may depend upon many people coordinating transport, meals, school hours, weather, work, and the river's seasonal condition. Fish are important in many places, appearing in household meals, local exchange, and town markets. Yet foodways throughout Amazonia remain diverse. Meals may also include cultivated plants, purchased foods, poultry, or in some communities, game. Ingredients and methods vary from one place to another, carrying family histories and local preferences. A little farther along the bank, someone checks the rope of a moored canoe. The knot is loosened, adjusted, and secured again. It is a small action, quietly completed, yet it reflects close attention to the water. The current may shift with passing boats, changing wind, or the gradual rise and fall of the river. Knowledge of the river is practical expertise. People who travel these waters learn to read currents and channels, floating vegetation, clouds, rain, and small changes on the surface. They observe fish movements through the seasons and know which routes remain deep enough for a loaded boat. They understand when particular land may flood, when a garden may be planted, and which plants are suited to local conditions. This knowledge develops through instruction, memory, repeated observation, and adaptation. It may be shared through spoken guidance and direct practice. It helps people respond to a river that changes from season to season and sometimes from one day to the next. The sun is now above the tree line, though its light remains soft in the humid air. Roofs brighten. Shadows under the raised houses become clearer. A motor starts somewhere beyond the nearest buildings, runs for a short while, and settles into an even sound. Another canoe crosses the open water, leaving a low wake that reaches our hull a little later. The village continues with its morning, without becoming a performance for those passing by. From offshore, we see only its public edges. There is a landing, a path, the outside of a shop or meeting place, and the quiet movement of boats. Private rooms and private conversations remain where they belong, beyond our view. Soon our boat begins to move again. The engine keeps a low, steady rhythm, and the settlement recedes gently behind us. First, the smaller buildings disappear among the trees. Then the last landing becomes a thin line against the bank. A paddle catches the brighter light once and is lost among the reflections. Ahead, the main river opens briefly before a quieter side channel turns beneath overhanging branches. We follow at an unhurried pace. The bank grows lower. The houses are left behind, along with the faint sounds of conversation, paddles, and morning work. Here, the trunks stand closer to the water. Their reflections descend into the shaded surface, wavering as the current passes. The river narrows among trees accustomed to its seasonal rise. Water touches the boat. The leaves gather above us, and we glide onward into the forest that floods. Chapter 4: The Forest That Floods. The side channel carries us beneath a roof of leaves, into cooler air and softened light. Behind us, the broad river remains bright beneath the morning sky. Here, among the trunks, sunlight arrives in scattered pieces. It rests for a moment on a branch, a floating leaf, or the curved edge of the boat. Then it disappears as the canopy shifts in a light breeze. The engine settles into its quietest rhythm. Water moves gently against the hull. On either side, the forest seems to rise directly from the channel. Some trunks stand in shallow water. Others descend into depths hidden beneath dim reflections. Their pale and dark forms repeat on the surface, so that each tree appears to continue downward into another forest below. This is not a forest caught in an unexpected flood. Across large parts of the lowland Amazon basin, seasonal flooding is a defining part of the landscape. The rivers rise and fall in a long, gradual rhythm, often measured over months rather than days. This seasonal rhythm is sometimes called the flood pulse. The word pulse suggests a pattern of expansion and retreat. As rain falls across the basin and water arrives from distant tributaries, the main rivers rise. Water spreads into channels, lakes, and low forest. Later, as the season changes, it slowly withdraws. Paths of open water become damp ground again, and broad flooded spaces narrow into separate waterways. The timing differs from place to place. The Amazon basin is so large that rainfall does not arrive everywhere at once. Water may be rising in one region while falling in another. The depth and duration of flooding also depend on the elevation of the land, its distance from a river channel, the kind of river nearby, and the conditions of a particular year. Even within one forest, a slight rise in the ground can make a great difference. One group of trees may stand in water for several months, while another patch nearby remains above it. Not all Amazonian forest floods each year. Much of the forest grows beyond the usual reach of the seasonal river water. Forest above the normal annual flood level is often called terra firma. The distinction can become less exact during extreme water levels, or where local drainage carries water into low places. Still, the term is useful. It distinguishes regularly flooded forest from higher forest, where the annual river pulse does not usually reach. Our boat passes a trunk marked by a faint horizontal line. Below the line, the bark is darker. Above it, the surface is dry and pale. The mark is a quiet record of water that once stood here and then receded. Nearby, a seed falls from a branch. It touches the water with almost no sound and sends out a set of small rings. The circles widen between the reflections until they reach a root, the side of the boat, and the shadow of another tree. Flooded forests are often described with two broad terms, varzia and igapo. These names refer not only to the presence of water, but also to the kind of river that brings it. Varzia floodplains are generally influenced by sediment-rich rivers, sometimes called whitewater rivers. The name can be misleading. Whitewater here is not bright white, and it is usually not clear. It may be tan, ochre, pale brown, or the color of coffee with milk. Its appearance comes from fine particles of sediment suspended in the moving water. Much of this material comes from far to the west, where rivers and streams carry eroded rock and soil from the Andes. The sediment travels downhill and eastward, passing through tributaries and larger channels. When floodwater spreads across lowland in slows, some of the material settles onto the floodplain. Over time, these deposits can help create relatively fertile soils. Yet fertility varies even within varzia. Water does not carry or leave the same amount of sediment everywhere. A bank beside a channel may receive a different deposit from a lake edge or a distant hollow. The floodplain is a mosaic, shaped by water, soil, plants, and gradual changes in the river's course. The boat glides on, close to the shaded bank. A pale leaf rests on the surface, turning slowly as the soft current passes beneath it. Beyond the leaf, a submerged branch reaches through the brown water. Above it, the living branch holds a small gathering of green leaves in the filtered light. Igapo generally refers to forest flooded by sediment-poor black water or clear water rivers. Researchers may use the word somewhat differently in different regions, but it commonly describes floodplain forest associated with waters that carry little suspended mineral sediment. Black water is not black because it is dirty or polluted. In sunlight, it can appear amber, reddish-brown, or like dark tea. Its color often comes from dissolved organic compounds released as leaves, wood, and other plant materials slowly decompose. The water may reflect the sky and forest so clearly that its color is most easily seen where a paddle lifts a few drops into the light. Igapo is neither empty nor inferior to varzia. Its soils and waters offer different conditions, and its communities of plants and animals are adapted to them. It is a distinct flooded habitat with its own seasonal patterns and relationships. The channel bends, and we pass beneath branches extending low over the surface. A few leaves almost touch their own reflections. In the shade below them, the current is barely visible. Only a thin strand of floating material shows which way the water moves. Some of the trees have been surrounded by water for weeks, perhaps months, yet they are not necessarily drowning. Many floodplain plants have ways of tolerating inundation. Specialized roots may help them endure waterlogged ground. Some plants alter the internal processes that keep their cells alive when oxygen around their roots becomes scarce. Others follow patterns of growth, flowering, and rest that are matched to the seasonal rise and fall. Seeds, too, may be suited to the flood pulse. Some travel by water. Some remain able to sprout after long periods of wet conditions. Others begin growing when the river retreats and fresh ground is exposed. There is no single method shared by every floodplain plant. The forest is made of many strategies, each suited to a particular place within the changing waterscape. When the river rises, the boundary between aquatic and terrestrial life becomes less distinct. Fish may leave the main channel and swim among trunks that stood on dry or damp soil during the lower water season. They enter the flooded forest to feed on insects, fruits, and seeds. A fruit dropping from a branch may become food below the surface. Insects that lived among leaves and bark may now be within reach of fish moving quietly between the trunks. What was woodland during lower water becomes, for a season, part of the river. Flood water also links places that were separate during the drier part of the year. A lake joins a narrow creek. A creek opens into woodland. Small channels cross low banks and form temporary routes through the trees. For a time, the flooded forest becomes an expanded aquatic habitat, shaded and complex with submerged branches, roots, leaves, and open spaces. We see only brief signs of life. A small ripple appears beside a trunk and fades. Something touches the underside of a floating leaf. Farther ahead, the surface trembles once, though nothing rises through it. Then the water is smooth again. The boat continues slowly, leaving very little wake. Reflections gather behind us. Green leaves appear in the water beside strips of silver sky, and the upright trunks become long, wavering lines. Where the channel deepens, the mirrored canopy seems almost complete. A soft current moves between the trees. It curves around roots, passes beneath floating seeds, and continues through a narrow opening ahead. Its motion is quiet, but it belongs to the much larger movement of water across the basin. There is a sheltered feeling here, though the forest is never still in any permanent sense. Water is always arriving or departing, even when the change is too gradual to notice. The visible channel belongs to a wider seasonal rhythm, connecting distant rain, mountain sediment, low floodplain, fish, fruit, and forest soil. Month by month, the edges of water and land shift. A route that can be traveled by boat during high water may later become damp earth beneath the trees. A lake that opens broadly into the forest may gradually draw back within its banks. The flood pulse changes the shape of the habitat without making it any less whole. For the trees, fish, and other life of the floodplain, this change is not a brief interruption. It is part of the year. The rise of the river brings access to new spaces. Its retreat reveals ground again. Each phase creates different conditions, and the forest follows them in its own patient time. Ahead, the trees begin to stand farther apart. The shade thins. Reflections that had been held closely between trunks loosen into broader shapes, moving beneath a widening patch of sky. The current carries us out from the flooded woodland at an easy pace. Behind us remain the pale watermarks, the submerged roots, and the quiet paths between trees. Water continues to touch the hull with the same soft rhythm. Before us, several streams meet the opening river. Their surfaces hold different shades of soft brown, amber, green, and copper. Each carries traces of the land and forest through which it has passed, and together they lead us toward the rivers of many colors. Chapter 5. Tributaries of Many Colors. The flooded woodland opens behind us, and the river receives more of the sky. Along the shaded bank, narrow streams emerge from between roots and hanging leaves. Some are the color of polished copper. Others carry a pale veil of silt. Farther ahead, a greenish channel reflects the open air, changing shade whenever a cloud passes above it. Each stream has traveled through a different part of the basin, touching particular soils, stones, plants, and forests before arriving here. The Amazon is not one uniform body of water. It is a gathering of rivers, and those rivers carry signs of the landscapes through which they have flowed. A traditional way of describing Amazonian rivers places them in three broad groups: white water, black water, and clear water. These names are useful, though nature does not always remain within tidy categories. A river may fall somewhere between them. Its appearance may change from one season to another, from the center of its channel to the shallows, or from a shaded bend to a sunlit reach. Even so, these three broad names offer a gentle way to begin reading the water. The current beneath our boat is pale brown. In the mellow light, it looks tan in one direction and ochre in another, with occasional flashes of silver where the smallest waves catch the sky. This is called white water, although it is rarely white. Its color is sometimes compared to coffee mixed with milk. Whitewater rivers carry abundant suspended sediment. Sediment is made of fine particles of rock, clay, and soil held within moving water. Many of these rivers begin far to the west, in the Andes. These geologically young mountains are prone to erosion, and their streams gather loosened material before carrying it down toward the immense lowlands of the Amazon basin. By the time the sediment reaches this broad river, many particles are so fine that they remain suspended in the current. They do not settle immediately to the bottom. Instead, they travel within the moving water, giving it a soft, clouded appearance. This color is not a sign that the river is unclean. It is evidence of a long passage across the land. Within the muted brown water are traces of distant slopes and valleys, carried onward by tributaries that join and widen as they descend. When white water spreads across a floodplain, some of its sediment settles over the land. Layer by thin layer, the river leaves part of its distant journey behind. Water chemistry, sediment, and seasonal flooding all help shape the vegetation and aquatic life found along the river's margins. The suspended earth is part of a larger exchange. Mountain stone becomes sediment. Sediment travels through the river. Some settles beside the channel, while some continues downstream. The slow current carries it onward, around bends and islands, toward another meeting of waters. A narrower tributary enters from the forest. At first it appears almost black beneath the trees. As we draw nearer, the color changes. At the edges, where the water is shallow and more light reaches it, the river glows reddish-brown. A small wave rises beside the boat, and for a moment its crest is amber, like tea held before a window. This is black water. Blackwater rivers usually carry little suspended mineral sediment. Their color comes largely from dissolved organic compounds released by vegetation in soils. Leaves, bark, roots, and other plant materials slowly break down in the warm, damp landscape. Rain and small streams pass through this material, carrying some of its dissolved compounds into the river. The process is a little like water, taking on the color of steeped leaves, though a river is far more complex than a cup of tea. Depending on its depth, its surroundings, and the angle of the light, black water may look amber, coppery, reddish-brown, or nearly black. Beneath a bright sky, its surface may also become a broad mirror, holding white clouds and green branches with unusual clarity. Black water is sometimes described as acidic, meaning that its chemistry may lean toward the acidic side. Yet acidity varies from one river and place to another. The dark color does not mean the water is dangerously acidic, just as pale or transparent water does not automatically mean that it is safe to drink. Color and safety are separate questions. The boat moves close to the boundary where tea-dark water enters the silt-colored current. For a while, the two remain visible beside one another. One side carries warm brown reflections. The other has a lighter, clouded surface. Between them lies a shifting seam, never perfectly straight, gently curling and loosening as the currents meet. Water does not always mix at once. Mixing requires movement and energy. It is affected by the speed of each current, the amount of turbulence, the form of the channel, and the properties of the water itself. Where two tributaries meet, their different waters may travel side by side for a time. Small swirls begin the exchange. Thin ribbons cross the boundary. The seam bends, narrows, and widens again. Here the darker water reaches into the pale current. A little farther on, the silt-colored water curls back into the amber flow. There is nothing fixed about the dividing line. Every turn of the current softens it. The dark water enters the pale water, and the pale water enters the dark. Gradually, quietly, they become a shared flow. Farther downstream, another tributary arrives with little suspended sediment and less of the deep tea color. Near its bank, the shallows appear pale and bright. In the center, the water looks greenish. When the sky clears, it shifts toward blue-green. Under the shadow of the forest, it deepens again. Such rivers are often called clearwater rivers. Many clearwater rivers drain very old, heavily weathered uplands. These include areas of the Brazilian Shield and the Guiana Shield. Over immense spans of time, weathering has shaped these ancient regions. Rivers flowing from them may carry relatively little suspended sediment compared with rivers descending from the younger, more erosion-prone Andes. Yet clearwater is another broad description, not a promise of perfect transparency. A clearwater river may still hold dissolved materials and fine particles. Its visible color depends on depth, the riverbed, the surrounding vegetation, the angle of the sun, and the sky reflected on its surface. Green water beneath one cloud may appear blue-green beneath the next. In the shallows, a pale riverbed may lend it brightness. In a deeper channel, the same river may seem dark. And clear water is not automatically safe drinking water. Even a transparent stream may contain things too small for the eye to notice. The eye can observe color and clarity, but it cannot answer every question about the qualities of the water. The three broad river types begin to feel less like rigid labels and more like stories of place. White water carries the traces of erosion and distant mountain stone. Black water holds dissolved compounds from forests and soils. Clear water often reflects old uplands, where long weathering has shaped the land. Between these forms are many variations, influenced by geology, soil, erosion, vegetation, chemistry, depth, and light. A river may resemble one group in one location and seem closer to another somewhere else. Rainfall and season may alter its appearance. A shaded section may look darker than an open reach. A shallow edge may reveal colors hidden in the deeper channel. The names help us notice patterns, but the river remains more varied than any three names can fully describe. And these differences affect more than appearance. Water chemistry helps shape which plankton can thrive. Plankton are tiny organisms that drift within the water, forming part of the food web. Sediment and dissolved materials influence aquatic plants. Fish communities vary among whitewater, blackwater, and clearwater environments, while connected channels allow life to move through the wider river system. Floodplain vegetation also responds to the water that reaches it. A forest regularly flooded by sediment-rich water does not receive the same materials as one flooded by dark, sediment-poor water. Over time, repeated arrivals of different waters help shape the conditions along the banks and across the floodplain. The rivers are distinct, but they are not isolated. Plankton drifts with the flow. Fish pass between connected waters. Sediment settles in some places and continues onward in others. Dissolved compounds move quietly downstream. Rain falls on one forest, enters a small stream, joins a tributary, and becomes part of a larger river. Every meeting adds another history to the current. Now the boat follows a long seam of color. On our left lies pale, silt-bearing water. On our right, the tributary remains dark enough to mirror the forest. The hull moves between the two without disturbing their quiet pattern. Water touches the boat in a steady rhythm, and the meeting line drifts first toward us, then away. The seam is not a wall. It is only a temporary pattern within moving water. Along its edge, tan becomes amber. Amber deepens toward copper. Reflected sky enters both currents as a shifting band of blue and silver. For a few moments each shade remains easy to see. Then a small curl of current draws one color into another. Behind the boat, the bands remain visible for a while. Farther back, they loosen into broad curves of tan brown, amber green, and reflected blue. At last, distance makes the boundary difficult to follow. Still, the mixing continues. Ahead, more tributaries gather. Some have traveled from young mountains, others have crossed ancient uplands, or moved slowly through forest soils. Each brings its own balance of sediment and dissolved material. Each surface responds to depth and shade, to the passing clouds, and to the changing angle of evening light. The channel grows broader, and the shaded banks draw farther apart. Above the darkening water, the sky opens into a wide, muted arc. For a time, we simply follow the current. Pale water passes beneath the left side of the boat. A darker ribbon drifts beneath the right. The soft meeting line wanders between them. Water touches the hull, pauses, and touches it again. The river carries mountain sediment, dissolved traces of vegetation and soil, rainwater, and the reflections of passing clouds. All of it travels onward, gradually mixing, separating around islands, and meeting again beyond another bend. The colors never belong to light alone, or to soil alone, or to the forest alone. Geology, erosion, vegetation, chemistry, depth, and sky all take part. What we see on the surface is the quiet result of many influences gathered together, and beneath that changing surface, the qualities of the water help shape plankton, aquatic plants, fish communities, and floodplain vegetation. The visible colors are only one part of a much larger river system. Evening settles more fully over the channel. The copper tones deepen. The pale current turns softly gray beneath the fading sky. Greenish water holds the last open light, while the blackwater tributary becomes a calm mirror of the forest. More rivers wait beyond the bend, carrying other shades and other histories. Far ahead, a low glow begins to rest above the horizon. The gathered river is widening toward Manaus, where ferries cross broad water and city lights soften at the edges. Near that distant glow, two especially different currents approach one another, each carrying the color and character of the lands through which it has passed. Chapter 6: Manaus and the Meeting of the Waters. The low glow ahead slowly becomes the city of Manaus. At first, it is only a pale brightness resting above the dark line of the shore. Then individual lights begin to appear. A row shines along the waterfront. A lamp glows above a floating dock. Windows show on a distant hillside, and steady navigation lights move across the river. Their reflections stretch over the Rio Negro in wavering lines. They lengthen and shorten as the water rises and settles against the boat. Manaus is a major city, broad and busy, standing on the Rio Negro near its meeting with the Solimões. From the water, its many parts reveal themselves gradually. There are ports and warehouses, passenger terminals and ferry landings, neighborhoods reaching inland, and industrial areas beside working channels. Boats connect the city with communities and towns throughout the basin. Some carry travelers beneath open decks. Others carry food, fuel, building materials, machinery, parcels, and ordinary goods for everyday life. The river is one of the city's great avenues. A ferry crosses at a measured pace, its engine sounding low over the open water. Farther away, a passenger boat approaches a landing lined with lights. Small craft pass closer to the bank, where their movement is sometimes difficult to distinguish from the shifting reflections. The sounds of Manaus spread widely: a distant horn, an engine slowing, voices near a dock, music too far away to form a melody. The broad river gives every sound room, and nothing seems to remain close for long. Our boat continues beyond the busiest landings. Its steady engine joins the larger urban hum, while the current moves beneath everything, unnoticed yet constant. On one side lies the illuminated shore of a modern city. On the other lies a wide expanse of dark water, open to the evening sky. Near Manaus, one of the Amazon basin's most recognizable confluences comes into view. In Portuguese, it is called the Encontro das Águas, the meeting of the waters. Here the dark Rio Negro reaches the lighter, sediment-rich Solimões. West of this meeting, Brazilian usage generally calls the great main river the Solimões. Below the confluence, after the waters have joined, the river is generally called the Amazonas. A name changes on maps and in conversation, although the water itself continues without a pause. From a calm distance, the meeting appears as a long boundary drawn across the river. The Rio Negro carries water darkened by dissolved compounds from leaves and other plant material. Its surface may look almost black in shadow, deep brown nearby, or blue where it reflects the open sky. Beside it, the Solimões carries abundant suspended sediment. Tiny mineral particles gathered from distant landscapes remain held within the moving water. The river may appear pale brown, tan, or muted gold. The two colors advance side by side in broad, curving ribbons. The boundary is not perfectly straight. It bends with the channel and folds around subtle movements in the current. It opens into narrow streaks where one kind of water enters the other. Along the edge, dark fingers reach into pale water, while lighter swirls drift into the dark. Some dissolve quickly, others lengthen and remain visible for a while. It is sometimes said that these rivers do not mix, but they do. Their joining is simply slow enough, and the contrast between them clear enough for us to watch part of the process. No invisible wall separates the currents. At every moment, small exchanges occur along the meeting line, both at the surface and below it. Turbulence, the irregular turning and swirling within flowing water, draws the two together. Eddies curl from one side into the other. Deeper circulation carries water across the visible boundary in ways that cannot be seen from the boat. Many conditions shape this gradual mixing. The rivers can differ in temperature, density, chemistry, and flow speed. One carries a heavy load of suspended sediment, while the other carries far less, yet no single difference explains the whole pattern. The depth and shape of the channel matter too. So do the curves of the banks, the contours beneath the water, the wind moving over the surface, and the three-dimensional flow passing through the channel. A river does not travel only forward. Within its broad onward movement, water also rises, sinks, circles, and crosses from side to side. It passes over changes in depth and around underwater forms. Currents meet beneath the surface, where their paths may be quite different from the patterns visible above. The long boundary at the meeting of the waters is not a fixed object. It is a living result of flow, renewed from moment to moment. Its appearance changes with the season and with the amount of water carried by each river. Wind may roughen the surface and blur part of the contrast. Cloud cover alters the reflected color. River height, the strength of the currents, and the position from which someone is looking can all change how far the bands seem to continue. On some days the division is especially clear, on others it appears softer and more broken. The visible boundary can continue for many kilometers, but it never looks exactly the same from every place or in every season. From our boat, the pale and dark waters lie beneath the evening light like two pieces of slowly moving cloth. Yet even this gentle image shows only the surface. Underneath, the currents are already folding together through depth and distance. We pass near the boundary without hurrying. For a time, one side of the boat reflects the deeper tone of the Negro, while the other moves above the lighter Solimões. Water touches the hull in the same steady rhythm on both sides. Behind us, the lights of Manaus rest along the shore. Ferries continue their ordinary useful crossings, carrying people along familiar routes. Cargo vessels wait near working docks. Passenger boats prepare for journeys that may follow the river for days. The city remains present as a soft arrangement of lamps, engines, buildings, and distant voices. Ahead, the space widens. The two colors continue beside one another, but their edges have begun to feather. A pale curve enters the darker current and turns amber. A dark ribbon narrows within the sediment-rich water until it becomes difficult to follow. The visible line divides into smaller lines, and then those lines become patches, whorls, and faint differences in shade. Reflected city lights tremble across both waters. Gold stretches over brown, then breaks apart. White light drifts across a dark surface and becomes a scattered chain. Beyond the reflections, the river gathers every current into its broad channel. Below Manaus, it carries the name Amazonas. It carries the mineral sediment of the Solimões and the forest-tinted water of the Negro. It also carries rain from distant tributaries, fragments of leaves, grains of sand, seeds, warmth, shade, and the steady movement of countless smaller streams. The city brightness gradually softens behind the boat. A ferry engine fades until it becomes only a low vibration, and then a quiet part of the greater distance. The banks grow less sharply outlined. Here and there, a lamp remains visible near the water, but darkness settles into the spaces between the lights. Along the river margins, other forms return to notice. Roots lie close to the surface. Branches lean from the shore. A brief ripple opens into widening rings. A wing crosses above the shaded bank and disappears. The Amazonas moves onward beneath them all. It is no longer two clearly colored rivers, but one widening current carrying both. Water presses softly against the hull. Behind us, the last long reflections of Manaus loosen, tremble, and disappear. Ahead, the darkened margins hold small movements of roots, branches, ripples, and wings, while the gathered river continues quietly on. Chapter 7. Life along the river's margins. Beyond the softened lights of Manaus, the Amazonas continues through the dimness, broad and steady beneath the boat. The two rivers that met above the city are no longer divided into distinct bands. Their waters travel together now, carrying fine mineral sediment, dissolved traces of forest leaves, and rain gathered from distant tributaries. Along the shaded bank, roots meet the river. Branches lean over the slow current. Floating leaves turn beside the hull, and now and then a small ripple opens upon the surface, widens into a circle, and disappears. From a moving boat, most encounters with wildlife are like this. They are brief, partial, and sometimes uncertain. An animal may be known by a breath rather than a body, by the movement of a branch rather than a clear silhouette, or by a call coming from somewhere beyond the first wall of leaves. The forest does not arrange itself for easy viewing. Its many lives continue within layers of water, vegetation, shadow, and distance. A quiet exhalation rises from the river ahead. For a moment, there is a smooth curve at the surface. It might be the back of a dolphin, darkened by the low light. Then the water closes again, rings spread outward, catching a little reflected sky, and soon the surface is calm. The Amazon river dolphin is often called the boto. It uses many kinds of freshwater habitat, including main river channels, tributaries, lakes, river mouths, and seasonally flooded forests. Its movements follow changing water and the movements of fish, rather than the simple boundaries drawn on a map. During the high water season, the river rises into forests and across low floodplains. Fish spread into newly available spaces, passing between submerged trunks and beneath branches that stood above dry ground only months before. Botos may follow them into smaller channels and flooded habitats. When the water falls, fish and dolphins shift their movements once again. A boto is sometimes imagined as uniformly bright pink, but its color is much more variable. One individual may appear gray, another may look pale pinkish gray, another may seem warmer in color after activity. Age, individual differences, blood flow near the skin, the color of the water, and the angle of the light can all change what an observer sees. Even the same animal may look different from one moment to the next. Another river dolphin, the tucuxi, also occurs in parts of the Amazon system. It is different from the boto and is generally smaller and gray. At a distance, with only a quick glimpse of a fin or back, Identification may not be possible. There is no need to decide. A single breath, a low arc, and widening rings are enough. Then the slow current becomes smooth once more. As daylight gathers, the river margins take on more detail. Vines descend between branches, pale trunks stand behind darker leaves, here and there. Fruit hangs above the water, ripening in the warm, damp air. When seasonal floods move beneath fruiting trees, the boundary between forest and river becomes less distinct. A fruit that would have fallen onto soil may instead drop into the water. It may float for a time, settle among roots, or become food for a fish. Some fish enter flooded forests and consume fruits and seeds. If a swallowed seed passes through a fish without being destroyed, it may remain able to grow. The fish can carry it away from its parent tree and release it somewhere else, perhaps near another flooded bank. In this way, a floodplain forest can feed fish, while fish can help transport the beginnings of future forest plants. The relationship is not always helpful to both sides. Some seeds survive and are dispersed, others are crushed or digested. Ecological relationships are seldom simple agreements. They have varied outcomes, repeated across seasons, and shaped by the kind of fruit, the kind of fish, and the conditions of the water. A small sound comes from the shore. Perhaps it is a fruit falling from a branch. There is a soft tap, followed by a faint disturbance beneath the leaves. Nothing more follows. The boat continues past, leaving the place to shade and water. Birds also take part in the movement of seeds. Some swallow fruits and carry seeds within them. Some drop fruit while flying, or regurgitate seeds at a resting place. Others break seeds apart and consume them. A passing wingbeat does not reveal which relationship is unfolding, but each movement belongs to the larger exchange between plants and animals. High above the river, a dark shape crosses from one bank toward the other. It may be a bird carrying nothing at all, simply traveling through the open air. Its wings hold steady for several moments, before it vanishes into the distant canopy. Soon there is only open sky again. Near a quieter inlet, a rounded point appears at the surface. It could be the head of a river turtle, raised briefly into the air. Before the boat draws near, it slips below, leaving a small crease in the water. River turtles use aquatic habitats throughout the river system. For many species, exposed sandbanks are also important nesting places. Yet sandbars are not permanent features. They appear, widen, narrow, and disappear as the water level changes. A bank open to daylight during the low water season may lie beneath the river during the floods. The turtles respond to this changing geography. Their seasonal lives are linked to the rise and fall of water, just as the movements of fish, dolphins, and people are linked to it. Along the Amazon, a familiar place may remain the same in memory while changing greatly in shape. Over the water, small insects turn in shafts of morning light. Some pass so close to the surface that their reflections briefly meet them. Others settle upon leaves or disappear among flowers in the canopy. Insects perform many different roles in the rainforest. Some carry pollen between flowers. Some feed on leaves and stems. Others help break down fallen wood, fruit, and other material. There are insects that hunt, insects that are hunted, and countless species that become food for fish, frogs, birds, bats, and other animals. Their presence also contributes to the sound of the forest. A single insect may make a faint pulse or buzz, but many together create a continuous background. Their sounds rise and soften with the hour, the habitat, and the weather. From the boat, the sound may seem steady, although it is made by innumerable separate lives. Water and land are connected here by the flood pulse, the seasonal rhythm in which rivers rise across the floodplain and later withdraw. This pulse opens pathways, covers roots, and leaves new surfaces exposed. It joins creatures that might otherwise seem to belong to separate worlds. A fruit can fall from a tree and become food for a fish. An aquatic insect may spend its early life beneath the surface, then rise into the air and become food for a bird or bat. A seed may travel in water, within an animal, or in soft mud beside a receding bank. The river enters the forest, and the forest enters the river. For a while there are no clear animals to see. There are only signs. A branch sways after the air has become still. Two circles spread near a patch of floating plants. A distant call is answered from farther inland. Perhaps a monkey moved among the higher branches. Perhaps a fish touched the surface. Perhaps the circles were made by a fruit dropping into the current. Uncertainty is natural along these margins. Much remains hidden by leaves, distance and reflected light. To travel quietly is not to collect one sighting after another. It is simply to notice how life leaves small marks upon the surroundings and then passes beyond view. The river broadens around a low, wooded island. On one side, the current moves gently through a narrow channel. On the other, pale reflections stretch across open water. A bird calls once from the island's interior. Farther away, another call seems to answer, although it may belong to a different bird entirely. The boat follows the easier water. Leaves turn in the wake. A smooth patch of current slides beside the hull, carrying a twig, a seed case, and one yellow flower that has fallen from somewhere upstream. Now the island begins to recede. Its trees merge into the shaded bank, and the narrow channel disappears behind a bend. Water touches the hull with a soft and regular sound. For a long while nothing rises from the river, nothing crosses the sky. Yet the quiet is not empty. Beneath the surface, fish move between changing depths. Within the branches, insects feed, rest, pollinate, and become food for other animals. Seeds travel in ways that cannot be seen from the boat. The floodplain holds the memory of high water, even where roots and earth have appeared again. By afternoon, the light has grown softer. Clouds gather gradually above the canopy, not as a sharp boundary, but as a deepening layer of gray and silver. Beneath them, the greens of the forest become muted. The river reflects less of the open sky and more of the shaded banks. A last ripple appears near the mouth of a small channel. There is one quiet breath, or perhaps only water lifting over a submerged branch. The rings widen and fade. Nothing else disturbs the surface. Warm air rests over the river. A few insects continue to turn above it, tracing small paths that cannot be followed for long. Leaves along the bank show their paler undersides as a mild breeze passes through them. Then the breeze settles. The boat moves beneath the gathering cover of cloud. The slow current carries it onward between forest and open water, between things briefly seen and things only heard. Wildlife remains within the margins, sometimes visible as a wing, a ripple, or a distant shape, and sometimes present only in the quiet connections between water, fruit, seed, and leaf. A separate drop touches the roof of the boat. After a pause, another falls, then another, lightly marking the quiet beginning of rain. Chapter 8. Rain Traveling Across the Canopy. A separate drop touches the roof of the boat. After a pause, another falls, round and quiet, against the wood. A third lands upon the river, where it opens a small circle in the dark reflection of the sky. The circle widens, becomes faint, and disappears into the slow current. For a little while the drops remain far apart. Each one seems to have its own place. Rain on wood, rain on water, rain among the high leaves along the shaded bank. Above the river, clouds have gathered into a broad gray cover. Their moisture has come from more than one source, and by more than one path. Some of it began far to the east, over the warm Atlantic Ocean, where water entered the air as invisible vapor. Winds and the larger movements of the atmosphere carried that moisture inland, across the coast, and toward the immense green interior of the continent. Yet the ocean is not the only source. Water is also rising continually from within the Amazon basin itself. It rises from rivers, quiet channels, damp earth, and wet leaves through evaporation. Warmed water changes into vapor and joins the air, though the change is too gradual to watch directly. Moisture also passes through the forest's living plants. Roots draw water from the soil. The water travels upward through trunks and stems, reaching branches and leaves. There it escapes as vapor through tiny openings in the surfaces of the leaves. This release of water by plants is called transpiration. When scientists speak of evaporation from soil and wet surfaces, together with transpiration from vegetation, they often use the longer word, evapotranspiration. The word describes a continuous exchange occurring across the basin. Water leaves the ground, the river, and the forest, and enters the air above them. The forest does not hold all this moisture close. Air moves, weather systems move, water vapor may travel beyond the trees from which it rose, just as ocean moisture may travel far inland. These paths cross and mingle, becoming part of a much larger circulation between ocean, atmosphere, land, plants, streams, and rivers. People sometimes say that the forest makes its own rain. It is a useful image, because the forest does recycle water into the atmosphere. But the full process is more spacious and more complicated. Rainfall also depends upon winds, seasonal patterns, the shape of the land, ocean moisture, and broad movements of the atmosphere. The forest is not working alone. It is one living part of a connected system. Another drop touches the roof, then two arrive close together. Along the bank, rain begins to mark the uppermost leaves. These high crowns form the canopy, a layer of foliage spread above much of the forest like an uneven green roof. Some trees rise higher than their neighbors, while others fill the spaces beneath. Vines, palms, younger trees, and plants suited to deeper shade occupy lower levels, each receiving light and water in a different way. The first drops settle on smooth leaf surfaces. The leaves darken and become glossy. Water gathers along their edges, trembling briefly before falling to another leaf below. Warm, moist air has been rising through the afternoon. As it rises, it expands and cools. With this cooling, some of the water vapor condenses around minute particles in the atmosphere, becoming tiny cloud droplets. When droplets grow and join, they may eventually become heavy enough to fall as rain. Forest transpiration adds moisture to this process. Research indicates that it helps build atmospheric moisture and may help rainy season conditions begin or grow stronger, particularly in the southern Amazon. Still, no single tree calls down a shower, and no single source explains the clouds. The rain above the boat is the result of many quiet movements coming together. The separate drops become a light, steady pattern. Rain on wood, rain on water, rain leaving the canopy. Across the river, thousands of small circles appear. They overlap until the surface no longer reflects the clouds clearly. The distant bank softens behind a pale curtain, though its shape remains visible as a long, low line of forest, with green turning gradually toward gray. The canopy receives much of the rain before it reaches the forest floor. Leaves and branches intercept the heavier drops, breaking their fall. Water gathers, spills, and drips through openings. Some runs along twigs and branches. Some follows the bark down trunks in narrow winding threads. Some collects in leaf bases, hollows, and small pockets in old wood. Below, the soil receives what passes through. Roots take up a portion. Some water remains near the surface, and some moves deeper into the ground. Elsewhere it slips into shallow channels, enters forest streams, and joins larger creeks. In time, much of it returns to the rivers, though its journey may be brief or long, direct or wandering. On the boat, the roof turns the shower into an even rhythm. The passengers sit beneath it, sheltered, watching the banks pass slowly. The sound is close overhead but gentle, a soft tapping made fuller by the many drops arriving together. The air begins to change. Cloud cover has reduced the warmth of the sunlight, and cooler air descends with the rain. Evaporation also carries away heat. The difference is subtle at first. There is coolness along the hands and face, and a slight easing of the warmth that rested over the river. A faint, earthy scent rises from damp wood and soil. The boat's rail shines. Small beads of water gather along a rope, meeting one another until they become heavy enough to slide downward. The engine continues in its low, steady voice. Beneath it is the hush of rain touching the river, too broad to belong to any one place. Near the hull, drops vanish immediately into moving water. Farther out, the surface is silvered and softly blurred. Tropical rain varies widely. One channel may receive a short local shower, while another remains beneath brighter cloud. At other times, rain spreads across a wider region and continues for longer. This shower moves over the boat without haste, covering forest and river together. For a while, its rhythm remains steady. Then, almost too gradually to notice, it begins to lighten. The far shore slowly returns. At first, there is only a deeper shadow beneath the gray sky. Then individual treetops appear. A palm emerges, its long fronds bending gently beneath the water they hold. Nearby leaves release drops from one level to the next, so that rain continues inside the forest even as less falls from the clouds. The rhythm on the roof grows less even. There is a steady patter, followed by a pause. A few drops arrive together. Another pause follows. Water still runs from the edge of the roof in a thin line, breaking into clear beads before it reaches the river. Along the canopy, every leaf seems to keep its own small remainder of the shower. A broad leaf tips and empties. A narrow leaf guides water toward its pointed end. A branch moves slightly as gathered drops are released, and then becomes still. Rain on wood becomes a quiet tapping. Rain on water becomes separate circles again. Rain leaving the canopy continues in hidden layers, from crown to branch, from branch to leaf, and from leaf to the shaded ground. The cooler air remains. It carries the scent of wet bark, damp soil, and open water. Sounds seem to travel differently through the softened evening. A bird calls once from somewhere beyond the bank. Inside the forest, water slips from a hollow and falls upon leaves below. Close to the boat, a final stream runs along the rail and disappears over the side. The clouds are lighter toward the western sky now, though the sun itself remains concealed. The river holds a muted brightness, smooth in places and lightly stippled in others. Behind the boat, the shower becomes part of the distant haze. Water is still moving everywhere, even where it cannot be seen. It rests briefly in the hollow of a leaf. It follows the rough surface of a trunk. It enters the soil beneath the trees, passes among roots, or gathers in a narrow forest channel. Other water remains in the air, carried onward above the canopy. Its paths are joined for a time, and then divided again. The boat continues with the slow current. Its sheltering roof is almost quiet now. Only an occasional drop falls from an overhanging edge, striking the wood with a soft, rounded note. Ahead, the bank opens around a broad floodplain channel. Trees stand along its edge in dark reflections. Beyond them, the outline of a settlement slowly takes form. A roof appears first, then a landing, and then the narrow shape of a canoe drawn close to shore. The shower passes without ceremony. The roof grows quiet, one drop at a time. Leaves continue to drip within the forest, and the river continues beneath them, carrying water gathered from clouds, soil, streams, and distant slopes. Rain on wood fades into stillness. Rain on water becomes an occasional circle. Rain leaving the canopy continues softly among the trees. Through the rain-softened evening, the boat approaches the floodplain settlement. Along the shaded bank, a few lamps begin to appear, warm and steady against the deepening green. Chapter 9. An Evening Beside the Floodplain. The settlement takes shape gradually beyond the rain-darkened trees. From just offshore, our boat follows the slow curve of the bank without drawing too near. A wooden landing reaches over the water, its posts reflected in long, wavering lines. Behind it stand several buildings, some raised above the damp ground, and others set farther back, where the land rises gently. The river beneath the landing has deepened to the color of evening. Now and then a drop falls from a roof and touches the surface, making a small ring that widens and disappears. A canoe approaches the bank at an easy angle. Its paddle enters the water, turns and rises again. At the landing, someone catches a rope and draws the canoe alongside. The rope is passed around a post, pulled snug, and tied. For a moment it hangs straight. Then the current presses against the canoe, and the line tightens. When the canoe drifts back, the line softens again. Tightening and relaxing, it follows the quiet movement of the water. Along the Amazon and its tributaries, boats may be secured in many ways. Some are tied to docks or posts, others are fastened to trees, floating structures, or weighted moorings resting below the surface. The arrangement depends on local conditions, including the depth of the water, the strength of the current, the shape of the bank, and the changes expected through the night. Here, beside the floodplain, river levels are part of everyday planning. The water influences where a boat can be left and how much rope it may need. It influences whether a narrow channel is navigable, whether a path can be walked, and whether a journey begins on foot or by paddle. It also helps determine where gardens can be planted and how long a patch of ground may remain above water. These conditions do not remain the same throughout the year. A landing used during high water may stand far from the river in a drier season. A path used for walking may later become a route for canoes. A shallow passage may open as the water rises, allowing small boats to move between trees. Elsewhere, a sandbar may emerge slowly, first as a pale line, and then as a wider stretch of exposed ground. People who live and work beside these waters often develop detailed knowledge of such changes. They may remember marks left by earlier floods on posts, trunks, steps, and walls. They may notice flowering and fruiting patterns, changes in fish behavior, or rainfall arriving earlier or later than expected. The speed of the current, the appearance of sandbars, and the depth of familiar channels can all offer useful information. This is practical expertise formed through attention, experience, and repeated journeys. It is not simply instinct, and it is more than folklore. A person who travels a channel regularly may know how the current bends around an island, where submerged branches tend to gather and where the water will go next, or which route usually remains deep enough during a particular season. Yet even careful seasonal knowledge has limits. Rivers shift, channels deepen in one place and fill with sediment in another. Exceptional floods can rise beyond remembered marks. Severe droughts may expose ground that has long remained covered. Rainfall can depart from familiar patterns, and changing climate conditions can make earlier expectations less reliable. Experience still matters, but it must be joined with close attention to the present river, to the water as it is today. From the boat, these many judgments remain mostly unseen. What we notice is simpler. Someone checks a knot, a canoe is moved closer to the landing, a loose object is carried above the damp edge of the bank. Small preparations settle the waterfront for the coming hours. The lamps along the settlement are clearer now. One shines beneath the roof, another appears farther back among the trees. From this distance, their sources cannot be known. Electricity varies widely among Amazonian communities. A settlement may be connected to a regional grid, or it may rely on a generator for part of the day. Some homes and public buildings use batteries or solar systems. In other places, light may come from kerosene lamps, candles, or flashlights. Even within one community, different forms of light may be used in different places and at different times. A bright electric bulb may glow near a landing, while a softer, portable light moves behind a wall. A flashlight may cross an open space and disappear. The warm points along the bank do not tell a single story. They simply show that evening activity continues. Sunset does not bring immediate silence. Voices carry over the water, although the words are too distant to distinguish. Somewhere near the shore, a wooden surface gives a low knot as something is shifted or set down. From farther inland comes a short thread of music, faint enough to blend with the dripping leaves. Another sound rises briefly, perhaps a motor or a household machine, and then settles again. Evenings in river settlements may include meals, conversation, schoolwork, worship, repairs, music, television, or preparation for the next day. Some people may be returning from work, while others are beginning an evening task. Boats, engines, paddles, tools, school materials, and other ordinary belongings may all need attention. Hammocks are common in many homes and boats across the Amazon region, though they are not universal. No single household arrangement represents the whole river basin. From offshore, there is no reason to imagine more than can be seen. It is enough to notice the broad outlines, roofs beneath wet leaves, figures passing through light, canoes resting close to the landing. The rain has cooled the air. A faint mist lies over the darker reaches of the floodplain, where open water continues beyond the settlement and enters the trees. Reflections lengthen below the bank. Each lamp forms a narrow golden path, broken whenever the current wrinkles the surface. Our boat slows until the engine becomes little more than a steady vibration. It remains beyond the landing, leaving the nearshore water open for local canoes. The settlement is close enough for the mooring ropes to be visible, yet far enough for private spaces to remain private. Another canoe is secured. Its bow touches the dock, draws away, and touches once more. The movement is slight, almost measured. Water sounds softly between the hull and the posts. Along the bank, conversations continue, but their edges become less distinct. One voice fades behind a wall, another passes along the landing and recedes among the buildings. The thread of music returns for a while, softened by distance and damp air. It becomes one part of the evening, together with insects beginning in the vegetation, water moving below the dock, and an occasional drop falling from a broad leaf. The western brightness narrows behind the clouds. Green becomes gray-green, then deepens toward blue and black. Soon the water beneath the dock can no longer be separated clearly from the shadows of the coasts. Only the reflected lamps remain, trembling in place. A mooring line rubs quietly against wood. A paddle is lifted into a canoe. A door or shutter moves somewhere along the bank, too softly to tell whether it has opened or closed. The settlement does not disappear into darkness. It changes its pace. Some lamps remain steady, others go out while new ones appear farther back. The riverfront grows calmer, yet ordinary life continues beyond what the boat can see. The current moves past the landing and around the moored canoes. It carries small leaves from the recent shower, each turning slowly before drifting on. Beneath the dark surface, the river follows the shape of the floodplain, passing old roots, fresh sediment, and channels known through years of careful travel. Our boat settles into quieter water offshore. The engine falls still. In its place comes the soft touch of the river against the hull. The sound repeats without hurry. Water against wood. A rope drawing firm, then easing. Leaves releasing the last of the rain. Across the floodplain, the lamps hold their warm reflections. The nearest voices fade until they are only a low murmur. That murmur joins the insects among the trees and the soft water beneath the landing. A canoe rocks once beside its post, then settles. A reflected light lengthens, breaks, and gathers again. The shaded bank rests beneath the deepening night. Buildings become quiet outlines. The open channel becomes a dark, smooth passage between them and our waiting boat. Nothing here is completely still. The ropes ease, the leaves drip, the current passes, yet every movement has grown smaller, and every sound seems to have more space around it. Darkness gathers over the floodplain, gentle and complete. And beside the warm lights of the settlement, the slow current continues quietly along the bank.